It's an anniversary again. Today, September 11th. It means a lot to a lot of different people, especially depending on what your age is. You know, I will never forget that morning, being woken up by a phone call from a very close friend of mine who lived over in Washington, D.C. Turn on the TV, turn on the TV. And at the time, we had the ability to see some news channels on television. And I got to tell you, it was a shock. I will never forget wiping the sleep from my eyes, going into the living room, turning on the television. It was 7:30 in the morning. And wow, couldn't believe what I saw. Like, wait, is this real? Is this really happening? All that live footage, the reports of what had just happened, the 2 airplanes that crashed themselves into those buildings. Who would ever think that something like that could happen to us, right? But what I look at is what has happened since this time. I mean, this was a long, long time ago. 2001, friend. 2001. Now, prior to 2001, do you remember so many terrorist attacks? Do you remember, like hearing stories of, airplanes flying into buildings? No. Do you remember even people driving vans into a mall and letting it explode? Bombs being put in public places? I mean, is it because we have so much more access to the internet and more access to different types of news? Or has there really been an increase since 9/11? One thing I do know is there's been a massive increase of fear, like a crazy increase of fear. And there's studies to prove it. According to the World Economic Forum, since the terrorist attack on 9/11, fear has increased in the U.S. Now, isn't it interesting who's writing that? The World Economic Forum? How do they know? Because when there's fear in the air, the market doesn't do very well. The market begins to decline. And so fear really controls what people do with their spending. In some places, they spend more, and in other places, they spend less. It's the same thing that happens during the elections, like, of course, the midterms are about coming around here in just a minute, where, there's going to be another fight out about who's going to be the next president. And those are going to be starting here very, very shortly. And so do you feel that you are more afraid since 9/11? Do you think 9/11 has anything to do with it? I would love to hear what you have to say. Please, write me right now, and I want you to tell me, write it in the comments right below wherever it is that you're seeing this video, unless, of course, you're watching on television. If you're watching on television, go over to Facebook right now, and I want you to write on the Dani Johnson Live page. I want you to write on there, yes or no. Do you think there's more fear in the air since 9/11? Do you think that 9/11 was the reason for all the increased fear? Can you believe how long it's been? Right, 2001, it's been 17 years since 9/11 happened. What changes have we seen to us as a culture? Have we become a better people since that time, or are we worse? There's one thing I can say that I have seen. I want to know if you've seen it too and if you agree or if you disagree. But I think there's been a whole lot more hostility that has somehow been risen up in our culture. Where you even see older people, older than me, okay? I'm a grandmother. I get it. Okay, so I'm not young. I'm not in my 20s like, my children are, or 30s for that matter, as my oldest child is. But what I've noticed and what I've seen is older people, meaning people much older than me, in their 70s, in hostility, screaming at people or even flipping people off on the highway or something. That is just not normal, right? You would think that by the time you reach that age that you're not, like that. Have you noticed people screaming at each other, even at ticket counters at the airport? Or there just seems to be a lot of hostility out there. A lot of, I don't want to use the word uncertainty because that's just what does that mean, right? So just people are unsettled. There seems to be no peace. There seems to be people who are afraid of, losing their identity, right? So you've got all these services that have come in. It's protect your identity, right? So there's entire businesses that have been built on fear, the fear of your credit card being stolen, the fear of your identity being stolen and people committing crimes underneath your identity. And then, your whole life is over, right? So What have you noticed? What kind of things have you noticed in our culture that has changed since 9/11? And does it have anything to do with 9/11? Or do you think that it really, really does have something to do with 9/11? The World Economic Forum also reported that 75% of Americans rate international terrorism as the most critical threat to U.S. security. I don't know. Is that true? Do you feel, are you one of the 75%? I know I wasn't asked this question by the World Economic Forum. I don't know who they asked, but they've come up with this number that 75% of Americans think that terrorism is the biggest threat to our security. Is it really that? Or is it perhaps, I don't know, other things? People in high places with lots of money who are using fear to control people. And also, I want to know this. Do you feel like living in fear is a good idea? Do you think that that is the answer to all of these terrorist attacks that we hear about like crazy, right? Like several a year. It seems ridiculous. You know, I know in my lifetime, and again, was I really paying that much attention to the news when I was in high school? No, it was on like all the time in the house that I grew up in. But I can't say that I paid a whole lot of attention. I mean, I remember the Iran-Contra thing. I remember the Sandinistas and darn, I forgot the name. I remember the war going on in Nicaragua, and I remember stuff going on in Russia. But I don't remember, and of course, there's always fighting in the Middle East, right? I mean, we've all grown up with all of that. But has it really increased? Has the fear increased in you? Are you more afraid? Do you find yourself unsettled about your future? I know this, that there's a whole generation that's like, why am I going to have kids? I don't want to bring kids in this violent world that we're living in. You know, I don't ever remember hearing about school shootings when I was growing up. So there definitely has been something to that. We asked this question, too, on our Facebook page, which, by the way, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have not come over and said hello to us there, come on over. You're going to meet some amazing people. Do you need to meet some amazing people? Do you need to meet some people of greater courage? Are you surrounded by a bunch of friends who have, like, no courage? Do you need to be surrounded by people who have vision and are doing something with their lives in spite of what's happened since 9/11? Listen to what Paul said. I think Paul had some really good insight, and it's Paul D. Mier. He says, I think the media uses fear-mongering tactics to boost views. If there's a feel-good story, it'll be talked about once or twice. But the second there's a school shooting or a natural disaster, it's round-the-clock coverage on every major news network. Views mean more ad dollars and higher profits for the networks. They don't care what it takes to get a viewer's attention, just that their ratings are high. Sorry to tell you, but that's exactly how that game works. So do you think that the media has something to do with causing fear in our culture today? Do you think that that's possible? I know it's possible. Absolutely, I know it's possible. You can't sit there and watch it day after day after day and not start to feel like, oh my gosh, what if this happens to me? Oh no, I hope there's not a hurricane where I live. Or oh my gosh, what if, you know what I mean? You just start, your mind just naturally starts to think about the possibilities of disaster happening to you. Your mind, when there's a school shooting, like right away, it's natural. It's human nature for us to go, my gosh, are my kids safe in the school that they're at, right? You know, when we hear of the terrorist attacks, you know, a van driving into a mall and setting off a bomb, you know, we are not as apt to just head down to the mall the next day, right? So there's no question, and absolutely fear takes ratings up, and you know, sadly, good stories are not the things that the news sells. They like to sell nothing but bad news. But anyway, so I wanted to encourage you with this today. If you're going to take on this anniversary of 9/11, right, September 11th of 2001, it's been 17 years, right? And so the fact is that if that since then, I want you to take a snapshot of your life, and I want you to look back to the last 17 years, and I want you to ask yourself, have I become more fearful or faith-filled? Have I become more hostile or humble? In the last 17 years, what has been the real impact on my life since 9/11 happened? Did I take a moment and a snapshot and go, you know what? Life is really short, and in a moment, a nation can change, and I want to make sure and take advantage of the freedoms that I currently have and live my life as a free person to do everything that I want to do versus what? Sitting in front of the television not doing anything with myself. So really, I think it's important today. Take a snapshot, 17 years. Here's something that I've noticed about myself and what I've noticed also about humans. The older we get, the less risks we tend to take. The older we get, the more set in our ways we become. The older we get, the more narrow-minded we become. The less out-of-the-box thinking that we have. I recently was in a discussion with a friend of mine who was around my age, like a couple of years older than I am. And I said to him, I said, wow, you know what? I had actually sold one of my companies 20 plus years ago, 1996, it was 22 years ago. And he was around, he was in my life at this time when this happened. And I said, can you believe that we are the age of the guys? And I gave the names who bought the company. And he's like, no, we're not. I said, yes, I was at Rudy's 50th birthday. I'm telling you, we are their age. And they were all around in their 50s. And now here we are of that age group. And I said to him, we used to look at them as old. We are now them. And the question I'm asking myself today is, am I thinking like the millennials? Am I thinking like my children do, that see the world and go, man, you know, the world is my oyster. I'm gonna go see what's there. You know, do we have the same inhibitions? Like we have no inhibitions. Do we have more inhibitions at this side of the fence than we had back then? Have we used something like 9/11 to shrink our dreams? Have we used all the terrorist attacks to shrink our dreams? Have we used the school shootings to shrink our dreams? Have we used our current society that is very hostile and fearful to allow us to take major steps back and to kind of lose sight of the freedoms we actually have? So with today being an anniversary date of a horrible tragedy, I want you to flip the tragedy on its head. And I want you to ask yourself, all right, if everyone else is afraid, then I'm going to be filled with faith. If everybody else is creating walls of fear around them, then I'm going to tear the walls down and build bridges to the places where I want to go. If everybody else is uncertain about the future, then I am going to be certain about my faith in my God and that my life is in His hands, and my days are not determined by a terrorist, but my days are determined by the living God. That if everybody else has completely lost sight of living life to the fullest and living life in freedom, well, then by golly, I'm going in the opposite direction, and I'm going to try new things. I'm going to experience new things. I'm going to do things I've never done before, and I'm going to do them because nobody else is. So if you have found yourself with walls inside of your head and you've gotten more narrow-minded since 9/11, tear those suckers down. We are still a free nation. We still have opportunity. We still are the home of the brave. We are still a people that can go and do and be anything that we want to go do and be. So the question is, when will you start? When will you step up, rise up, and do something phenomenal with your life? You have no idea how many days you have left, and you have to stop using whatever excuses you are using as weapons against the great future that I believe the living God has set before you. Your excuses are not weapons, but your excuses should be the reason why you step up, why you rise up against all odds and do something powerful and phenomenal with yourself. You know what's so interesting is just 2 years after 9/11 happened, we started DannyJohnson.com. Yep, August 23rd of 2003, just 2 years after. While other people were so afraid to start businesses, other people were so afraid to take risks, people were afraid of making investments, that's exactly what we did. August 2003, their fear caused us to go, we're not going to live like that. In the face of fear, we're going to start something new. We might fail, we might fall flat on our backsides, or we might help some people. We might make a difference. We might change some lives. We might help businesses grow. We might see people come out of debt. We might see marriages totally healed. We might see entrepreneurs be birthed and provide jobs for millions of people. We might see the greatest things happen. And by golly, guess what, friend? That's exactly what's happened over the last 15 years. That's exactly what happened over the last 15 years. So you have a choice. How are you going to see it? What are you planning to do with it? And by the way, if you need help, like if you are that person, well, man, Danny, man, thanks for having this conversation because yes, I've been stuck. I've allowed society's pressure and all of this bad news and all this fear of terrorism and this fear of things changing stop me from making the important changes that I should be making so I can live my life to the point that my kids look at my life and say, I want to be just like them. I want to be just like my parents. I want to be just like them. I want to be adventurous. Come on, think about it. When was the last time you lived life as an adventure versus a prison sentence? A prison sentence filled with bills and mortgages. A prison sentence filled with like the same old day in, day out junk. And lifeless relationships and boring entertainment that seems to grab us in and tantalize us into some kind of like trance or something. We end up wasting time. It's time. It's time to take the important steps that you need to. And if you need help, listen, there's a couple things for free that you can get the help. Go to DannyJohnson.com. There's all kinds of free materials there. Come over to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Danny Johnson Live, D-A-N-I Johnson Live. Get involved with the community that's over there, a community that refuses to live in fear, that refuses to not be courageous. Come on, they live by this, right? You've heard this before, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. You need to be surrounded by a people that are following that passage. They're doing something awesome, right? They're working on themselves, becoming better spouses. They're building careers and businesses and taking a portion of the money and helping the extreme poor, something I wish our government would do. So if you need help, that's free, man. You have access to a community. You have no excuse to stay the same. You need to meet some of these people. And then if you're ready to take another step, get a hold of this book. It's free. I will pay for this $15 book for you. You have to pay for the shipping to get it to your house. Don't you think that's more than fair? Go to firststepstowealth.com. Again, that's firststepstowealth.com. And if you're one of those people that you like, I can't stand reading, but you like audiobooks, you will have access to the audio portion of this book once you go ahead and get your free copy of this. So once you fill out the form on the website, firststepstowealth.com, then you'll see what you can do to get a hold of the audio portion of this book, which I think is much more powerful to listen to it than to actually read it. So anyway, that's your choice. If you're a reader, you're going to get through this book in just a couple of days. It's about 300 pages, by the way, and it's rich with content. And, by the way, rich with stories of people who followed these exact steps on how to do what? Not stay in that broken place of fear and not be manipulated by the fear-mongering that is happening in our nation, not being manipulated by the pressures of bills and society to stay stuck. But this book is going to show you exactly how I went from homeless, yes, to a millionaire in 2 years. If you don't want to make millions, don't. But if you want to make a little bit more money, the book will show you how to do that very easily. And it'll also show you how to make millions of dollars if you follow what it says, as we've had many other people follow and have done that. So it's your choice. So again, firststepstowealth.com. You can get your free copy. You pay the shipping and handling. I will pay for the book. And then once you fill out that form to get your free copy of First Steps to Wealth, you'll have the opportunity to check out the audiobook of it as well. That's it for me today. Come on this happy anniversary day, listen, it's a new dawn. It's a new day. Be courageous, unafraid. Let's attack the next decade of our lives, showing the world that we are free and we have not lost the brave, and we will continue to fight for our freedom and to be brave by doing what with our time? Living it in freedom, like being debt-free, being financially free. Hello? Being free emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and financially. So that's it for us. God bless you. Have a great one.
If this episode was an encouragement to you, go to DannyJohnson.com and share it with your friends now. You never know who else needs to hear it. This has been The Danny Johnson Show. Join us every weekday at 7 a.m. for more insights that will help you get to the life you've always wanted.